Thank you for being here. So I'm SC Moati. I'm the founder of Products That Count. I live in San Francisco. I came here for our inaugural event tonight. So thank you very much for trusting us, for being here. This event is this speaker series is going to be taking place every month on the second Wednesday of every month. So please pull up your phone right now and mark your calendar. Repeat every second Wednesday of the month. Plan to come here at Zillow. We are one of the largest networks of product managers and early adopters in the world. We have monthly speaker series in San Francisco, San Jose, New York, London. Seattle's our first foray outside of that big metropolis zone. And then in a few months, we'll be expanding to Boston and Los Angeles. We're on a more of a slow growth pace because what we care about, we're a nonprofit organization, what we care about is building communities. So for most of our events, half of the audience is coming back and has been at our programs before, at least half of the audience. So we really care about building a community of great product practitioners, and that's what we're here to help build with our friends from Zillow and with you guys. And so thank you for being here. I want to thank our partners. First and foremost, Zillow, who's our host, who's providing some booze, which I'll taste after the talk, and some delicious food. They've cooked up a feast. If you haven't seen it, thank you very much. I'm going to give the mic to Justin for a few minutes.
Thanks. And to be clear, we didn't cook anything. We just know great people who do cook things. So thanks for coming. A couple quick housekeeping things. If you need to use the restroom, just head down this hallway over there and look for it on your right. It shouldn't be too hard to find. If you get lost, let me know. But yeah, we're super excited you're here. I attended one of these about a year ago. We were just chatting and was just blown away. Loved the community aspect of it in San Francisco, and chatting with Nate, who I work with, saying, man, we need to get this here in Seattle. So I'm ecstatic that it's here. And then out of pure happenstance and coincidence, Adam, who I used to work for, is the first speaker in Seattle, I'm super excited to hear what Adam's been up to in the last 4 years since I left 8 nights. But yeah, thanks for coming. We are hiring, so one of the great things about hosting is that I can plug for any open positions. Literally any open position. So developers, product managers, business development, other things like that. If you're interested or just want to learn more about Zillow or chat, I'll be around. I look like this, and you can find me. So thanks a lot.
And thank you, guys. Our other partners, I'm going to say a few words about them, Amplitude and Particle. So the way we partner, because we have the luxury, being a nonprofit organization, to pick companies that we believe give a great service to the community, we actually pick partners that we trust. So Amplitude is a great platform for analytics. If you're looking to get insights into your product, they're a great choice. We are also investors in Amplitude. And then Particle is a data aggregation platform. So if you have lots of complex systems and you need to sort of make sense of the data from one to the next, this is a great choice as well. So thank you to them for their support also. I want to introduce you to our head of chapter, Anne Retcher. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone who made it out tonight. I met every single one of you as you were coming in the door tonight. And if you have feedback, you can reach me at ann@productsthatcount.com, and together we can build a fantastic chapter here in Seattle. And if you'd like to volunteer, also email me, please. Thank you. Thank you, SC, for being here.
So without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker tonight. I met Adam through referrals. Like, that's the beauty of the network, is that right now, like, there's almost nobody that I meet directly. It's always through the network. And I was really blown away by his perspective on AR, saying, every product really needs an AR strategy, and AR has a real business model that's associated to it, which is, something that's, I think, a refreshing and interesting message. So very much looking forward to your talk, and welcome.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, SC. I think I'm mic'd up here, AJ, right? So I'm going to give you that back. Thank you. Perfect. So thanks for making it out on a lovely evening here in Seattle, and hopefully it'll be some content that's worthwhile and interesting. Certainly want to make this something that's more of a discussion as well. So if there's things and questions you have, feel free to let me know. But I'm just going to forward through to our slides here. Or maybe do we need a switch, AJ? Thank you. So today I really wanted to discuss a little bit about why I certainly believe augmented reality is going to be a huge part of all the work we're doing as product managers across a variety of software disciplines. And I titled this 500 million reasons you need an augmented reality digital strategy, because there are real numbers to back up this being more than just a fad and a kind of a new flash in the pan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of 8/9. We're a services company that grew out of doing web and mobile work. My background previously was at Microsoft, but for the last 9 years, we've been working on new innovative uses of technology, helping big companies leverage those technologies in novel and interesting ways. And we made a big bet and a pivot into AR and VR about 3 years ago. And part of what I want to talk to you about today is really our experiences there and where we're seeing a lot of traction in a variety of different verticals. When you think about holograms, VR, AR, your mind probably goes straight to sci-fi, and that's really, as a bona fide geek myself, that's really when I first put on the Oculus DK1 and saw what the state of the art was just 4 or 5 years ago. I personally was blown away, and I knew I wanted to be involved in this and make it a big area of focus in my career. Whether it's the Minority Report or other areas, we're starting to enter a new revolution in human computing interaction. If you think back of the course of history over the last 30 years or so, we've had the PC revolution, we've had the rise of the internet, we've had mobile computing, but I really do think this is kind of the fourth era where this notion of visually mixing what's the physical and the digital world is really going to be the predominant way in which we interact with computers, along with some other ancillary technologies that we'll also talk about. We are actively developing solutions in a variety of different verticals. In fact, I would say almost every vertical you can think of, we either have discussions going on, everything from retail, automotive, governmental and public sector, financial, healthcare. It's really just surprising how many different inquiries we get in this space. Part of it because it is an interesting and novel new technology, but also there are actual use cases emerging that are very much worth investigating and starting to set the stage for this next era in computing. So a lot of our work tends to be with innovation teams or marketing teams who want to be on that cutting edge. Our mission is really to transform enterprise with innovative workflows that are unlocked by VR, AR, and MR. Enterprise is the area of focus we took because there's already a fairly well-served entertainment and gaming segment, and we didn't want to necessarily fish where there was already a lot of activity going on. But we're making a bet that enterprise is going to be the next big space where these technologies are going to be an important part of the way we work, and that's why we decided to build our business there over the last few years. Currently, we're a 15-person team. My co-founder and I met at Microsoft. We were both there about 13 years, mostly in their online services and research divisions. Worked on a lot of version 1.0 products, and that's really why we named our company 8/9. We tend to focus on things that are not necessarily in the visual purview, the kind of hidden below the iceberg, 8/9 of an iceberg being hidden below the water. So we tend to focus on new things that are not quite kind of fully developed or fully in the public mindset. We tend to work on everything nuts and bolts, from meeting with a client, educating them on these technologies, moving into UX design, development, and production. So it's kind of a full-service agency. And we were lucky enough to be selected to be part of the initial HoloLens induction program, where we got a lot of early access to Microsoft's mixed reality device, the HoloLens, behind closed doors. And that was another kind of reinforcing point for us that we wanted to be a big part of this. We work with a wide variety of clients, as I mentioned. You can see how many different verticals these are. Some of the bigger ones we've worked with outside of tech, so we work with Amazon, Microsoft, but we're also doing a lot with in the financial sector around data visualization with folks like the Vanguard Group and Citibank, as well as kind of training scenarios with folks like Lowe's. So it's a very broad swathe of stuff we're working on. I just wanted to touch briefly on the three kind of core technologies when people think of VR and AR, just as a ground level setting. VR is immersive technologies where you're not able to see the physical world. You're fully immersed in experience. It's kind of like wearing diving goggles. I'm sure most of you have tried some kind of a VR headset at some point. If you haven't, go out to a Microsoft store or anywhere and try one. It is a mind-blowing experience. AR and MR, these are, I would say the nomenclature around this stuff is really up for debate, and usually AR covers MR as well as a bit of a catch-all. But really with augmented reality or AR, you're talking about overlaying information onto the physical world, or in mixed reality, actually kind of placing objects that you can interact with natively in the same way that you might be able to do in the physical world. So AR traditionally tends to be more of a heads-up type display. Mixed reality starts to blend the distinction between physical and digital. Wide variety of headsets here. Almost every technology provider you can think of is jumping into this game, either because they think there's something there or there's hardware to sell. On the lower end side of things, you have things like Cardboard, pioneered by Google, very low cost headset. New York Times gave them away to all their subscribers. It's a cheap, easy way to insert a phone and have a kind of immersive experience that's actually, fairly reasonably priced and also easy for novices to get into. You then have some of these, the next stage up are some of the devices like the Gear VR and Google Daydream. They're a little bit more integrated, more comfortable form factors. You move up to room scale VR, where you actually go beyond just interacting with objects with a 3 degree of freedom controller, but actually able to physically move through a space and be tracked within a volume. And really, there's only a handful of players currently in that space, with HTC and Oculus really leading the way there. And PlayStation actually having a really broad consumer base building on the PlayStation Pro, but a little bit less of a well-defined tracking solution. In augmented reality, the current market leader, and I would say this is still a very developing market, is Microsoft with the HoloLens. General purpose computer you wear on your face, essentially. But there are a variety of smaller players emerging that are starting to either fill niches in, say, warehouse management, or bicycle or entertainment and sports. I think you're going to see a lot more activity in the AR space in the next couple of years here. We have relationships with all these guys. There's a great ecosystem emerging where it's a symbiotic relationship. They have hardware, they need software and solutions. That's where we're focusing our efforts, is really on how do we create solutions and user experiences that really leverage the capability of the hardware today. Outside of headset-based AR and VR, And really the reason why I said there's 500 million reasons that we should be thinking about strategy here as product managers is some of the recent moves by Apple and Google around ARKit and AR Core. These are new capabilities on existing devices, primarily phones and tablets, that essentially allow you to look through your phone and see an object placed into that physical environment. And pretty much overnight with the launch of ARKit, Apple became the predominant AR player in the world. Whether they'll release a headset at some point, certainly tons of speculation and seems like a very natural evolution. But in many ways, they're seeding the ecosystem now using their existing application developers and providing very simple tools for people to be able to detect a plane using the visual recognition capabilities of the phone, as well as the gyroscope and very stable tracking, to be able to allow people to have experiences with their applications they weren't able to do before. You've probably seen things like the Amazon application where you can look at furniture, or the IKEA application. There's a variety of games coming out or already on the market that's starting to explore this. But this is only 4 to 6 months old. We have an application called the Box AR. If you do have an iPhone, I encourage you to download that and check it out. But we're seeing a huge amount of demand for mobile AR. And this is probably the easiest entry point for anyone looking to experiment, certainly from a consumer perspective in this space. And I think this is also where you're going to see a lot of enterprise adoption as well. In the same way with the early stages of the iPhone and Android, you saw people initially kind of thinking of it as a consumer device, and then almost every business has an enterprise suite of applications as well. From a numbers point of view, I think the latest predictions are up to 1 billion users by end of 2018, and 3 billion by 2021. So this is not something to be ignored. Just a very quick example. This was a demo we put together within actually about 24 hours of ARKit being announced. Our team got very excited and put this together. This is our studio down in South Lake Union. We have about a 5,000 square foot warehouse, a lot of AR and VR equipment, and it's a great creative space for us to be able to experiment in. So the team put together a little example of how we could transform this kind of corrugated iron door into a portal to another experience. And marketers saw this. We had about 200,000 views of this video within a couple of days, so it was a good kind of promotional piece for us. The other big reason mobile AR is seeing a lot of traction is the popularity of Pokemon Go. I mean, just amazing statistics here. Grossed over $1 billion in revenue since their launch, and I think this is probably a little bit older data. It's probably a lot more than that at this point. Even despite it potentially being a little bit of a flash in the pan, that was really an indication that there's something to this and consumers are interested in it. I think the statistic here that was really interesting was 45% of time spent in the top 20 games on the Android was spent in Pokemon Go compared to the other 19. And depending on which analysts reports you read, there's been some pretty lofty, I would say, predictions about the growth of the markets here. But really, the potential is meant to be in the $100 billion plus range over the next 5 years. With AR being the predominant segment compared to VR, and I think that's primarily because I think there's a lot more potential in the enterprise side as opposed to just the pure consumer gaming and entertainment side of VR. From a vertical or from a segment point of view, you can see, and this certainly mirrors what we've seen over the last couple of years. initially, most of the spend has been on hardware and kind of gaming or entertainment type experiences. There's just a little sliver of enterprise stuff, and that's where we've been kind of seeing, that's where we've been really fishing and looking for opportunities. But, you know, our hope, and really we're already starting to see this in 2018, is kind of this growth in other segments like enterprise, non-game applications, a wide variety of different sectors that will start to grow over the next few years. So in the near term, you know, the takeaways here are mobile AR is really going to dominate most of the adoption of augmented reality and VR in the near term. Smart glasses longer term as there's more maturity with things like next versions of Oculus, Rift, Xbox, PlayStation. That's certainly, I think the notion of wearable computing is really going to be the longer term growth. But, and we've actually seen some blunting of I would say, the VR market as a consequence of things like ARKit and ARCore launching. A lot of, you know, the notion is a lot of the potential things like Gear VR as being you know, walking down through a plane and seeing everyone in VR. I don't think that's going to happen this year or necessarily next year, but, you know, the second and third iteration devices, I think that's very likely. And probably the biggest game changer in that space is going to be the Oculus Go, which launches in the next few months here. It's a $200 dedicated VR device that allows you to, you know, essentially have all the functions of, say, a Samsung Gear or Pixel at a very low price point. So I think that's going to drive a lot of adoption. But I want to point out that this is, when we think of AR, our minds go to the visual side of things, but there's a lot more in the ecosystem that starts to fit together. And we really are talking about augmenting ourselves as human beings. And I just want to touch on a few developments and how these things start to fit together in our minds. You know, the single most important software infrastructure in computing, far more valuable than Facebook's social graph or Google's page rank index, is this notion of the AR cloud, according to Mr. Ori Inbar. And this idea is, and actually just today we saw an interesting announcement from Google. So Google Maps now has an API that allows you to bring in that 3D content into a Unity application. And if you think about every square inch of Earth all of a sudden being an addressable physical space that I can display relevant information on, whoever owns that index is in a pretty interesting position of power. Whoever owns that ecosystem and the go-to way for me to be able to annotate the world in a myriad of different ways, this is really as powerful as crawling the web, indexing it, and but in a fully physical three-dimensional form. And some of the technologies around that start to make this a pretty powerful proposition are really the other hot technologies we're hearing about nowadays. Things like Internet of Things, instrumenting the world, having sensing devices wherever you are throughout the physical environment. You know, you need ubiquitous connectivity, whether it's satellite-based from Musk or Google or Microsoft or wherever that comes from, but high bandwidth connections that enable you to serve up very rich content are really a need in that space. You know, machine learning, we hear a lot about artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think it's not that difficult to imagine a world where content is maybe being available on the blockchain, experiences and applications are being created on the fly by machine learning and artificial intelligence that is contextually aware of what I'm doing in the physical world. And so, you know, the notion of a static website or a static piece of content really starts to go away when all these pieces come together. You can get a little bit even more sci-fi and start to think about robotics, physicalized avatars that are representing or actually allowing you to do things in other environments. And I really don't think these things are sci-fi. I think these are things we're absolutely going to see in our lifetime and probably in the next 10 to 20 years. So really, everyone's going to get superpowers, which is, you know, who doesn't want superpowers? Just a few examples here. Super sight. So The integration of 2D and 3D visuals as you go about your daily work and personal life. If you buy into this notion of a headset that you're wearing and is augmenting your environment, you will have all of these different kind of visual capabilities that might seem like science fiction. Being able to collaborate with somebody remotely at any time. Seeing the world through somebody else's perspective, being able to literally step into someone's shoes and see what they're seeing at any point in time, anywhere on Earth. In gaming and entertainment, I think you're going to see this as kind of the tip of the spear. I think where you're going to start to see these kind of first-person experiences are going to be in places like soccer and baseball and football. In the workplace, I think there's going to be kind of a blending of your traditional screens as well as holographic content that will be displayed alongside it, or in some cases you won't use a screen at all. You can imagine being on a plane and simply having your entire workspace set out the way you'd like it right in front of you. This is a visual from Magic Leap, which I've had a chance to see. Super memory. If everything's recorded, indexed, stored, why do you need to retain everything in your short-term memory that you have up here in your wetware? There's some existing kind of developments in the space, things like Samsung's Gear 360 cameras. Google's got their clip-on camera. You're just going to see a ton of these. It's just going to be the norm to constantly be recording, constantly saving it to the cloud, constantly having that analyzed by machines, and then providing the ability to index, search it, show me all the conferences I've ever been to, show me who that person is that just walked through the room. These are things that are not science fiction. They're literally just around the corner. I quite like this little example of a startup that has kind of a flying Alexa type device that, a drone that goes to your home. But in many cases, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Being able to, maybe check in on the kids, or on a larger property, maybe there's some security alert, or checking in on your pet puppy. Who knows what that'll be. Smell. Many of you might have seen this wonderful series on Netflix, Black Mirror. Really explores a lot of dystopian notions of it. But this was one of my favorite episodes where the protagonist has contact lenses, and everyone in the world has these contact lenses, essentially, that is doing just what I described. Storing, allowing you to go back, relive, index, and search through that content. And you do start to think about the ramifications for society as well as products and what it is that the kind of world that we're about to enter here. Hearing, there's some other great advances from Google recently around natural language. I mean, these are early forays and certainly by no means perfect, but pretty amazing that nowadays you can have an audio device or a pair of headphones that's listening to the world, able to translate in real time, and in a matter of seconds feed you back any language translated on the fly. In the same way, that's just one use case. The other is when we're looking at things, you can do machine learning and identify objects. But Bose actually just, I think, released some audio or some AR glasses that are more audio oriented as well. And being able to Shazam or listen to what's going on in the environment and contextually bring up information is going to be another big augmentation. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some moves from Amazon in that space as well.
Hey Isabel, how's it going?
Just a quick example.
Hej Isabel, hur är läget?
Helt okej, tack.
Absolutely okay, thank you.
What do you think of these cool new headphones?
Vad tycker du om de här coola nya hörlurarna?
Mitt team designade dem, så jag tycker de är ganska coola.
My team designed them, so I think they're pretty cool.
Learning. The way we're living in a world where the notion of a job for life has really just gone away. That's not going to happen anymore. And so what we now are faced with is how do we retool and provide ways for people to very rapidly adapt to that changing reality. Maybe you could take somebody who's an ER nurse and in a very narrow area, very rapidly train them using AR and VR in something that might take, 4 years, might now take 4 months using a variety of different digital techniques. I don't want to be the first to try that, but, you get the idea. So some of the examples of this kind of notion are things like being able to remotely collaborate from afar. So if I'm in this case, if my mother back in the UK has got a new washing machine and she's asking me how to program it, there are applications right now from Vuforia. This is a great new application. A few months ago they launched this, or maybe the end of last year, called Chalk, that allows me to FaceTime essentially with her, look at what she's seeing, and then annotate it within 3 dimensions to enable her to understand how to program that VCR or switch out the cable on your Comcast box, whatever it might be. I mean, if you think about how many billions of dollars are spent on customer support, interactions where somebody's scheduling time to visit a home and help them with something very simple. I mean, this could save billions of dollars, and I think this is just going to be a very much something that everyone comes to expect with their service providers. What this also implies is a little bit of a new knowledge economy as you think about an aging population, or as you get older in life, still being able to take all this information you have locked in your head and help somebody who's maybe in a different locale, a different country, rather than maybe going to a mechanic. If I can spend $20 and fix something myself, change out that light bulb that they're going to charge you $150 for. I mean, these are entirely new economies and marketplaces that are going to emerge as soon as these devices reach a level of ubiquity. Here's that kind of ER notion, but maybe in this case, if you had a projector up here and there's a heart attack somebody has, God forbid, just for it to be able to maybe recognize that someone's on the ground and then display information on it. You can think about the first aid box of the future that has a ton of information that might be, life critical, and for the cost of a small kind of pico projector and a little bit of machine learning. So I think this is a ubiquitous type of an idea. You take a little bit further. We start to talk about human augmentation physically, certainly in construction, in the military. This is very much going to be something we're going to see more and more of. And also, as we think again about the aging population, these are going to be early robotics that are going to help us as we get older to be able to continue to have a more functional life as we get a little bit older. We talked about kind of being in multiple places at once. I think as the web evolves and we maybe start to have kind of a three-dimensional version of the web, you start to think about how are you represented in that world. The new Ready Player One movie, some of you may have heard of from Spielberg, certainly going to touch on a lot of this stuff. It's a wonderful book if you haven't read it. The movie looks interesting and promising. But how you're represented in that world and how you are conveyed in that world is going to be a huge area of interest, and it cuts across everything from marketing to productivity. Maybe you have different manifestations for different jobs. Sometimes it might be very abstract. In other cases, it might be completely photorealistic and real. So your mannerisms are conveyed. There's a lot of information that is intuitively, we put out there. I use my hands a lot when I talk, but when I'm in VR and I'm having a conversation with my brother and my nephew using Facebook Spaces and Oculus, just by the way my brother's kind of sitting or talking, I can tell how he's feeling, or if he's got an idea about something. There's a tremendous amount of cues that we can convey, even using the rudimentary capabilities we have today with controllers. And that is only going to continue to get more and more sophisticated. If you think fake news is a big deal now, wait until, you really won't be able to trust your eyes in the next few years here. This is a great example where somebody's literally putting words into Donald Trump's mouth for a change, and here we're seeing that. You're seeing both eye and mouth gestures being conveyed on that in a pretty real-time manner. And I think importantly, and something that may not be initially obvious, but empathy is also something that can be measured. Microsoft has some great algorithms that are able to take a video feed and give a confidence level of whether someone's sad or happy or angry or frustrated. And that's really through machine learning and training the systems on asking people how they felt at those times. So you'll be able to, in real time, tell whether someone's lying, whether someone's thinking about something or sad or angry that you would never have picked up on. And again, massive ramifications for these augmentations, but things that are coming in the not too distant future and are really already here today. I always love this example from China where, these are traffic type cams, but, look at how many things are being constantly analyzed and accurately tracked in fractions of a second. So we're really talking about an era where our senses are really going to be amplified beyond anything we've ever been able to consider before. So given all that, and obviously it's a lot of things to think about, how should we be thinking about this as product managers? So if the whole world is now a channel, if every aspect of the physical world is indexable and an opportunity to serve up an experience or a product interaction, how will we even start to plan or think about that? And I think looking at sci-fi, you're seeing things like The Hunger Games or Avatar, where sorry, Essie, can I? Sure, no problem. You're starting to think about people interacting within these physical environments and orchestrating experiences physically. I think the marketers of the future will absolutely, at a live event, be thinking about who's there, what are they doing, what is the experience I want to serve up to them right now. There's some other shots here from both Iron Man and Avatar of a similar nature, as well as kind of command and control scenarios, supply chain management. We're actually building supply chain management solutions to enable people to take these very complex mental models and visualize them in a way that starts to mirror some of these things we see in science fiction. Personalization, I think you get this idea of everyone fears this notion of walking down the street and just being completely bombarded by virtual and augmented reality objects. And it starts to bring up questions about, will I have to pay to turn off these ads? Is this something I don't get the option to turn off? What's a good experience as a product manager? How do I think about marketing to a consumer if this technology exists, and what's a bad experience? Essentially, we're going to go through that same thing we went through with the internet, where there's 1,000 pop-ups and starts to become a little bit like this wonderful Brazilian, I think it was the gentleman who made this video, kind of really showing the horrors of where that could initially go. And I have no doubt this will happen in the not too distant future. Analytics starts to become an interesting thing for us to think about, especially when it's placed contextually. What did a consumer interact with? How did they feel about it when they were interacting with that object? And then how do you make sense, if you have all that data, how do you then make sense as a product manager to actually be able to take an action on it? This is a short kind of segment from a demo we actually have available on the HoloLens for free if anyone happens to have a HoloLens. But this is really about planogramming in a retail environment. If I'm an Adidas or a Nike and I've got a store design I want to rejig it for and optimize, we're able to allow you to, through augmented reality, place those objects and those shoes onto virtual shelves. And then scenario play, will I sell more if I put a red shoe at the top versus a blue shoe? Or if I discount this object, what does the back-end data tell me that how this is going to change our revenue? So I think having contextually placed analytics is going to be something you're going to see probably pretty quickly, especially in physical and retail environments. And then just to kind of wrap things up, if everyone starts to see the world through their own kind of rose-tinted glasses, then you're also going to see a lot of fragmentation that makes it harder for us as marketers and product managers to be able to target any one segment. Today we have kind of traditional different blocks of group. It could be hipsters, it could be punks, it could be goths. But in the future, everyone's probably going to have a very personalized view that they might only let a small segment of friends and family see how they manifest in that physical world. And it's going to be less, I think, less obvious around how you target somebody or how you even evaluate how they see themselves in the physical world. So there's a lot to think through, even in just that space alone. But I think, specifically as a product manager, it's going to be interesting to see how we start to think about people's self-reflection with an environment, and it also being dependent upon their access to technology, which kind of also broaches into this sense of a widening age and economic disparity. If one segment of the population only has Google Cardboard and the other segment has high-end contact lenses, I mean, we really are going to start to see some big changes, fundamental changes in the way people perceive themselves, the way people perceive reality, and this notion of a shared viewpoint of the world completely goes away. So I hope that was helpful and useful. I know I touched on a lot of different subjects in a short period of time, but this is an area I hope you can tell I'm super passionate about. If there are any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. And thank you again for making the time on a lovely evening here in Seattle. Questions?
So you touched on the flows of classes.
Yeah.
Intel also has these classes that came out really steep, but they're not a full feature, they're not general purpose like HoloLens.
Yeah.
Do you think these are going to be effective consumer on-ramps at some point, or are they going to be more effective as like single purpose devices used for function that each of them thing?
I think you're going to see both happen in parallel. It's interesting to see, Microsoft really did take I'm going to do a general purpose device. And I think in some ways it's a good thing to help test the market. At the same time, it's not like everyone's rushing out and buying a HoloLens today. But, their V2, their V3 devices might start to narrow in specific segments. And actually already seeing that they've got a kind of ruggedized hard hat version that's kind of compliant with all the safety standards. But I think whether it's Google Glass, whether it's HoloLens or Bose or Intel, I think you're going to see lower cost single function or narrow function devices that you'll wear for a short period of time, and then the rest of the time it'll go out the way, at least in the near term. And then, as it just becomes more popular, people are going to ask for more and more features and just demand the more general purpose device over time. That's my sense.
Oh, this is a microphone. Wow.
Speak into the cube.
Most interesting microphone I've ever seen. You mentioned Magic Leap.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, perspective, comments?
I can't really comment. I think they have a super interesting place in this ecosystem. I'm excited to see the final product, and certainly we plan to be developing on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. you just want to try the microphone.
Yeah, it's too cool. From your perspective, how are you, I know you touched on analytics and user experience, but what are you seeing as the primary driver for the user experience of like how you're measuring that analytics? Like, is it, voice? Is it gesture? Is it a wand?
I think it's still pretty early.
Yeah.
So maybe to clarify, like, what specifically you're asking, like what kind of analytics people want? Or
Right, because we're so early in the ecosystem where you have the chicken and egg situation between the hardware and the software, and then so many different ecosystems of the device, but like, where are we seeing where the user is going? Because it's such a new environment that is uncharted to, get into a userless UI or any of that stuff of how do you really drive that behavior, and just from your perspective of seeing that whole ecosystem, like what are you seeing as how we're measuring that? Or
I think so there's two core areas there. I would say in virtual reality, you're starting to see